la famille.
Welcome to the Rocket Tower. Good evening. So I'm not actually the head of product at Rocket. I hate to disappoint you. I'm a director of product here at Rocket. So I build companies for Rocket, and Rocket builds companies. This talk is about launching at rocket speed. So Rocket is not called Rocket by accident. We like to do things fast. We build things quickly because we believe that's the best way to create really massive impact and build things that are big. So if you look at the companies that Rocket has built that are out there, we have 66 companies at the moment that are operating in over 100 countries and employ over 35,000 people. In the 9 years that Rocket has been around, we've built 5 unicorns, so 5 companies that are currently valued at over €1 billion. And a lot of those 66 companies will just be earlier in their life stage, so we hope obviously that a number of those will go on to become unicorns in their own time. So if you look at how does Rocket create those companies, then there are 2 prongs to that. There's kind of 2 different ways that we do it. We start always by identifying industries, business models that we find interesting, that we think have the potential to be huge. And then we either build those companies ourselves through Rocket Internet, so that's what I do, or we invest in those where we find other companies that we think have high potential. And we do that through the Global Founders Capital. In either case, we then have a number of experts in all the different functionalities from product and tech through sales, marketing, operations to help scale those companies. So regardless whether those are companies we've built ourselves or those are companies that we've invested in. And we do that to try and make those companies obviously as successful as possible. So this talk will mainly be about the Rocket Internet side. To say this is the side where I work, where we're building those companies ourselves and then spinning them out. So to give you an idea of the breadth of companies that we build, this is a selection of the companies that we've built this year. This isn't the full list. Some of the companies we've built this year are not yet publicly announced. So yeah, this is a selection. So we've got Campsy, which I'll talk about quite a lot, is a booking platform for campsites. We have Instafreight, which is a logistics platform. Everdyne is a food subscription business. We have Zinsgold as a German fintech startup. And Bandist is a marketplace for musical instruments. So you can see there's quite a broad range there of different industries, different companies that we work across. An analogy that we like to make is that if you're starting a business on your own, that's a bit like building something in your garage. Or building a car in your garage, or you might be building something in your garage. For us, when we build companies, it's a bit more like building something on a production line. We have all the experts from sales, marketing, as I say, across different functionalities. So when we build a business, this is something that we do again and again and again. And every time we build a company, we get better at it. It doesn't mean that every company is the same. It just means that the process of launching business, we get better at ourselves. And the way that we're launching businesses now is not the way that we were launching businesses 5 years ago. And the way that we are going to be building companies in 5 years will undoubtedly be different as well, as we learn more and improve all the time. So if there was a typical business, of course there isn't a typical business, but if there was a typical business and a typical timeline for launching it at Rocket, it would be 100 days. Why do we do that so fast? We do that so quickly because we want to get a product out to market. We want to get real users using it. And from having those real users, we learn about the market, we can understand them better, and we can therefore continually improve the product, make it better, and improve the product itself. And this is the lean startup cycle that everyone from Silicon Valley through to Berlin is doing. So there's no secret about this. I think we just push that speed really as fast as we can. For more tangible benefits or more detail, there are 4 things at least that I can think of that are a good reason to get something live and to market quickly. So firstly, understanding your product. Now you can go and ask people what they think of something, how they will act in a particular situation, what their problems are. But until you actually see those users on your site, that you see them using their app, you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what they're going to click on. You don't know if they're going to actually pay for your product. The second thing is the unit economics. So the unit economics are whether you're going to make money on every transaction that you process. And again, this is something where you can ask a customer whether they'll pay for something, but actually, until you're taking money off them, you don't really know if they're going to pay for it. And it's very difficult to understand the operational cost of delivering whatever it is that product that you're delivering them to is until you're actually doing it. As soon as you're live, those sorts of calculations become a lot simpler, and it's a lot easier to see what the profit potential of your business is. So it's another reason to get live is we don't want to spend a year or two building something that when we put it to market doesn't actually make money. Third thing is strategic partners. And here there are different partners that you can have. So when you are live, you immediately get exposure to the wider public. And that includes not only customers, but also suppliers, investors, and other companies that you might be able to help out or collaborate with. And it's much easier to make those kinds of partnerships when you've got a product that you can show them than when you're pitching them a deck with some pictures on it. And finally, footprint is important. So for a lot of tech businesses, then they work in a market which will be winner takes all, especially on a local basis. So we heard this about Tok, dealing with Deliveroo and Foodora. Like in that case, it's likely that one of those businesses will dominate in each city. So if you want to dominate in a particular area or a particular market, it's important that you get out the doors quickly and start establishing a footprint as early as possible. The rest of this talk is going to be about Campsy. So Campsy is a business that I was working on at the beginning of the summer, or spring through the summer, as we launched it. I was one of the first people on the team. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a bit like if you took Booking.com and you made it for campsites rather than for hotels. So Campsy is not only one of the businesses we launched this year, it's actually the fastest company that Rocket's ever launched. And it was 28 days from the team being pulled together to us going live. How do we do that? So, how do we do that? There's only one big idea here, and that's this idea of ruthless focus. If you want to launch something really quickly, and you believe it's worth doing that for the reasons I've just mentioned, then you need to be super dedicated to getting something out the door. And that means making sacrifices, and you've got to be willing to make those sacrifices. There are 5 kind of like bits that I then break this down into that kind of illustrate what I mean by ruthless focus. The first one is work with inside constraints. So if you want to launch in 28 days, you can't ask your engineers, how long is this going to take to build? Because they will definitely not tell you 28 days if you want to build an entire website, an entire business. They will probably tell you 3 months or 6 months or a year. But if you ask them, what can we build in 28 days? Then they'll also probably come back to you with an answer. And that will be a different business, it will be a different website. But it's probably, if you're clever, good enough to test the business that you want to get out there. So frame things in those terms, and you can really accelerate the speed at which you can get to market. Now, for Campsy in particular, we wanted to have a very fast start, because when we started looking into the market, it was beginning of March. So that's here. And this isn't showing up very well. But this is a chart that shows the search trends of various camping-related terms across the course of the year. It goes from January on the left to December on the right. As you might imagine, there's a big spike in the summer when the weather's nice and everyone wants to go camping, and it drops off at either end of the year when it's winter and it's raining and it's cold outside and no one wants to go camping. So when we started looking at camping in March, and we were at this point here, we realized we needed to launch really quickly to be able to take advantage of that peak of traffic. If we launched in 100 days, which is what it takes, sort of the typical Rocket business, we'd be launching at this point. We'd be halfway through that summer peak. And at that point, we asked ourselves, well, is it worth doing it this year if we're going to miss half the traffic? Why don't we do it next year? But if we did it in 2017, then we'd probably have a bunch of other ideas. Maybe someone else would have launched. So we kind of worked it the other way, and we're like, no, we're going to do it this year, and let's do it as fast as possible. So we asked ourselves if we could do it in a month, and we thought we could. And when we do it in a month, then we can launch at this kind of second black arrow. And that's before this whole summer peak. So then we thought we could have the whole of the summer to understand the business, to get user feedback, to further improve it, before we went into the winter. That's the whole reason that we pushed ourselves as fast as possible. How do we do that? Well, this is a website called Zen Rooms, which is another venture that Rocket has built. So Zen Rooms is a business hotel site in Southeast Asia and South America. So it's not a great starting point if you want to build a camping website. But this is basically what we did. We took Zen Rooms, we turned it green, we did a few other little things, which I will talk about, and then we launched it. Like, this is not ideal, sure. If you want to go camping, you're probably not looking for the same user experience as if you want to go for a business trip. But it's good enough that we can see if there is a market for people booking camping sites online. One of the things we had to deal with was the way that Zen Rooms structured their data. So Zen Rooms, as like dealing with business travelers, quite sensibly divided all their hotels up between cities. So if you're going to Singapore or Hong Kong, you probably don't care that much where in the city you're going to stay, because you're just going to that particular city for a meeting. And the cities are relatively small, so you can get around. For camping though, or for Campsy, what that translated to was that we had to put our campsites in individual German states, because that was how they'd built their database. And we didn't have time to reconfigure it, or we didn't want to take the time at this point, I should say. So on our site, you had to select the German state that you wanted to go and camp in, somewhere like, Saxon, and then you could see all the campsites that were in Saxon. Not a great user experience at that point, but also it was good enough to get started. Now, obviously, the site's been launched, it's been live for 6-7 months now. We've had a lot more time to further improve it. We can do what you'd expect to do from the start, which is group the campsites and make them available by the different facilities that they have. So are they close to water? Are they close to a beach? Do they have loads of facilities that a family would want to use? Are they more kind of out in the wilds where you get this real sense of going back to nature? This is how you'd want to do it, eventually. It's not how you have to do it to start with. And I think you need that distinction between what is really important to get out the door, to have an MVP, and what is the end goal, because these are very different things. Point number 2 here is ask specific questions. So when we launch an MVP, we're always doing that because we want to find out more about the market. And when we build this minimum viable product, the question is always, well, how many features, how much needs to be in that MVP before it's worth launching? Because obviously the more features that we stick in, the more polished it is, the longer that's going to take us to develop it. The way to answer that question is to work out, well, what do we need to know? What's going to make a material difference to how we see the prospects of this company? For us, we'd done about a week's research on the market, which we felt pretty good about. And we built a financial model off that. So we had all this information that we put into a model to understand what the economics of the business were. Could it be profitable? Could it be big? Could it be successful? And at the end of that, we knew we were making a few assumptions there, but there are a couple of assumptions that were really core to whether we thought this would work. The first one was the CPA, the cost per acquisition, or cost per acquired user. And the other one was the basket size. So how long or how much were people going to spend with every camping trip that they booked? To test these things, though, you don't really need much of a website. To test how much it costs you to acquire users, you need a landing page, and it needs to look like a camping landing page. So we've got one of those. It's pretty bare bones, but we can drive traffic to that site, and we can see how much it costs us per click on Google or Facebook or wherever else we go to drive traffic there. Similarly, for the basket size, we need to have some indication of how long are people going on holiday? What kind of extras do they want? How many people are they booking for? Are we talking about like individuals who just want to go camping on their own? Are we talking about like family groups who want to book for 10 people? For these things, we didn't actually even build or a payment system for when we launched. We decided that was too much trouble. We built a checkout form. Again, this isn't very visible, is it? No. So this is like a form where you can just put in your basic details, your phone number, your email address. You can see on this side over here, you've got like the number of people going, number of children, the dates and so on. But this gave us an indication of like how much people were going to end up spending on their camping holiday, which gave us an idea then of like what was the potential of the business. And you can still see here, this is actually pulled from the designs that we were doing. It's still got the prices in from Zen Rooms because we never bothered changing it until we put it live. Third point here, align and delegate. So if you're launching something, you're doing it on a small team, it's important that you're not duplicating work, that everyone can get on and do their own thing. But at the same time, it's important that you're all building the same product. If you're all trying to do different things or you all have a slightly different vision of what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to be slowing each other down rather than speeding things up. So first you need to align on the big things, and then you need to delegate to everyone, just let them get on with stuff. So for us, one of the really big questions was what was the business model? And we looked at probably 3 different business models. The first was a sort of consumer-to-consumer model like Airbnb, where we thought, well, maybe people want to allow people to camp in their garden, or if they're farmers, they want to allow people to camp in one of their fields. Maybe this is what we should be doing. We looked at Kayak, more like an aggregator, where we were saying, hey, maybe there are campsites out there that are already taking bookings, and we just need to bundle those all up into a nice search experience. And we looked at the marketplace for Booking.com. We said, actually, maybe people want to come to one site, our site, and make their booking there. Maybe that's not something they can do anywhere else. When we looked at what was out there, what was the kind of the competition, and when we ran through the economics, it was quite clear that we were going to build Booking.com effectively. Like that was going to be our model. That took us like a week to decide. Like it's the longest we spent deciding something in Campsie probably before we launched. But once we had that in mind, we had a very clear idea then of what needed to get done. So from that point onwards, we didn't spend a lot of time kind of giving feedback. I didn't spend a lot of time giving feedback to the marketing person because I trusted that she would get on with her job. And she didn't give me a lot of feedback on the product stuff because she trusted I do like my job as well. We did, this is what the team looked like. So we started off with just 6 people. We had 3 developers. I was effectively the CPO person. We then had a head of ops and a head of marketing. During the course of the 4 weeks when we launched, we then added a CEO person and an intern to help us out. But that was it. That was the entire team. So that kind of like reinforces this was a small team that got this done. This wasn't like we threw 100 people at this to get it out in 28 days. But as well, you can see that there are very clear responsibilities for everyone in this. Like everyone's assigned to a particular role or a particular function. So the way that we managed to kind of stay aligned, but also to delegate, was that we ran Scrum across the entire company. So this wasn't just the tech team that was like moving tickets. This was the CEO and the CMO and everyone kind of in the morning saying what they were going to do. So when we had things come up like, oh, we actually need to register the company, then we had a ticket for that. So someone actually got on and did it and didn't forget it. And this was so successful actually that Campsie still runs Scrum across the entire business today. So this is actually their Scrum board from 3 or 4 weeks ago. When we started, it was just like the middle section. It was just one board. It was a lot simpler. But it was really successful for us. And then after 15 minutes, like a check-in each day, then we could get on knowing that we're all going in the same direction, but also then splitting up to make the most of all of our time. 4th point here is innovate efficiently. So innovation is expensive, and it's very powerful. So when you innovate, you need to really understand your customers, and you often need to do multiple iterations to get something right, to produce something that's really excellent. So what we say is innovate efficiently, like use innovation where you need to, where it will be most effective, where it will deliver most value to your customers. If you're looking at features which you already have a great best practice for that aren't that different for this particular industry, don't bother reinventing the wheel. Use a best practice and save the innovation for where it really matters. So in this particular case, like I showed you what we did with the Zen Rooms with the catalog page, where we have all the different hotels. Like for us, that was good enough. We weren't gonna spend any time redesigning that page because there was little value that we were gonna add in 4 weeks at that stage. Now, since then, it's changed a lot, but that was not where we wanted to spend our time. We originally got interested in camping because of this company, HipCamp, in the US. And as Rocket, sort of one of the things we asked was like, well, should we just completely clone their site? Should we just take what they're doing and do it in Europe? We quickly realized this wasn't going to work for us. Like, if you look at the US, where HipCamp are, they've got a lot of national parks where camping is. So a lot of the best places to camp in national parks. And they're run by rangers, and it's a very different feel to what's going on in Europe. Same time, they were doing a peer-to-peer model. So they were having a lot of farms or people with just like big stretches of land where you could go and camp. And again, that didn't really feel the same as Europe, where there's just a much higher population density and people have got smaller bits of land to go and camp on. And finally, when we looked at US camping, we could see a lot of it was like this. It was like, well, you drive your RV up and you park somewhere, and actually you don't need a lot of infrastructure. It's all about the scenery and being outdoors and driving around. Whereas in Europe, a lot of the camping is about going and finding a campsite by the beach because you want to go to the beach, or going to a campsite that is a holiday camp and has 5 playgrounds and 2 pools and a water slide and stuff because you're going with your family. So looking at HipCamp and then looking at the market, we realized this was not what we wanted to do. At the same time, more specifically, when we realized that we were going to be building Booking.com for camps or campers, and we were going to be doing that off Zen Rooms, we realized that the checkout function also was not going to be working for us. And this was effectively like the one area where we're like, okay, in 4 weeks, we can change one thing. What is the one thing that is going to give our users most value? And this was it. It was the checkout. So if you look at the Zen Rooms checkout, it's very sensible for a business hotel site. So it has an in and out date. You can put in the number of people who are staying, and you can put in the number of rooms that you want. And it comes out with a price. Seems pretty reasonable. When we looked at campsite pricing, it looked like this, right? So there are different prices for whether you want to take your dog or not, whether you're going in a tent or a caravan or an RV, whether you're bringing your children, and depending on the campsite, whether those children are 13 or 16 or 5, whether you want a water hookup or an electricity hookup or a TV hookup. And then all of these things change by season. Like there's high season, there's low season, and then there'll be special days within those seasons, like holidays, where they know they'll have high demand. So this kind of pricing model, we realized, was not going to fit into Zen Rooms and was in no way going to reflect what the campsites had on offer. So we also realized that there was no way we could reflect this kind of pricing in an MVP that we would have 4 weeks to build. So we managed to distill it down to this. It still has the check-in and the check-out date. That's still important. We split it out to adults and children, and we took the sense that like for most campsites, maybe like 70%, then a child meant someone under 16. So that's where we put the cutoff. And we had the type of camping in there. So this question of like tent versus caravan versus camper van, so on. And that we felt gave people like an 80% accurate price. And that was okay because they weren't paying straight away, and we confirmed the booking with both the campsite and then back with the camper before the booking was confirmed. And then also, just to be a little bit extra safe, we kind of put some safety margin on it on the upside. So we took always the most expensive prices that the campsites were charging for that kind of combination. So then if it was low season, we could actually go back to the person who booked, to the user, and say, hey, actually, this isn't going to be quite as expensive. Aren't we great? We've got you a discount. It's going to be cheaper. Sort of like that. Yeah. Now, if you look at what the checkout function looks for Campsy, again, having been out live for 6-7 months, having got a load more user data of how people use the old functionality, having shown it to a bunch of campers in the flesh, campsites in the flesh, it looks like this. And this now represents all that complexity that you see before. It doesn't look complicated because a lot of that is behind the scenes. But this is, we can get to this level of quality once we've been out live. And that's the reason we're pushing ourselves to get out live so quickly. Final point here, accept limitations. So if you're going to launch quickly, then, as I said before, you have to make sacrifices. You have to be willing to do that. And you just want to sort of like remind yourself occasionally that you have made those sacrifices, and that's okay. In particular, for us, that meant limited functionality. So we didn't have payment in there for launch. That was okay. We could send the campsites a bill for all the leads that we sent them afterwards. That's what we did for the first few months. We had huge amount of manual operations. So for every booking, basically, we would get an email with all the details. We'd call the campsite, we'd confirm they had the availability, we'd check all the prices with them. Then once we had like confirmation and a real price, we'd go back to the customer and confirm that they actually wanted it at that price. And then once they agreed to it, we'd go back to the campsite and confirm the booking. That's super manual. Like, you cannot scale that. But to start with, that's fine, because we could process those orders ourselves. We could do it manually. We could hire a couple of interns, and then gradually we could automate that process as we scaled up. And by doing it manually to begin with, we actually learned quite a lot as well. And finally, and technical debt. This was a problem as well. So this whole thing about where the campsites were associated to German states and so on, we were unpicking that in the weeks after launch. But again, we were spending time doing that technical debt stuff whilst we were learning about the market. So there's always going to be a base level of quality that you need to put something live out to market, and you can't sacrifice that. But you can sacrifice some of the other things, especially things like behind the scenes, and kind of get up to speed once you're live, because you'll be learning when you're out there. And as well, like, I think whenever you launch something, it's likely the first couple of weeks you're also going to be experimenting not only with the product, but also on the marketing side, getting the word out there. So, you probably want to have something out that the marketing people can start working with before you're expecting your first orders to come in. That was it. Those were the 5 points. As I say, the overarching message here was ruthless focus. So be really, really precise on what you are building, why you are building it. Align amongst yourselves and get on with it. And then when you've got your MVP out there, that's not the end of the journey, that's the start of it, right? Then you've got something out in the wild that you can look to improve in the future and go on and build into a successful company. And that's it.
Congratulations on the presentation. I like the time frame about the demanding, but it was related to deliver the product, but generally, first, you need to fulfill with the offers, and also people that are looking for camps, they do it in advance. So they do maybe 1 month before, 1.5. Mm-hmm. How did you handle with this? I don't know if you can share a bit of the result of.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, this was we decided to actually go for this, both looking at that chart and also asking ourselves, well, how fast do we think we can do this? If we'd asked ourselves that question of how fast can we get out, and the minimum time had been 2 months or 3 months rather than 1, because we didn't feel turning Zen Rooms green would work, then we may well have decided not to do the business. So on the other side, the question you asked was, people book in advance, obviously. So even by the time that we launched in April, then a lot of people have booked their summer holidays. And this was true. We found that when we started going and speaking to campsites, some of them were like, oh, but everyone booked back in January. And we're like, oh, good to know. But even so, we found there was still substantial demand. And from when we launched in early April, right to the height of the summer, and then dropped off. And there were still people who were booking spontaneously right into late summer before demand started to drop off again.
And to get into the offers to the platform, how was it?
As in what marketing channels did we use, or?
To put the campsites inside the platform to hunt them.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was probably the most painful thing, to get content for the site in 4 weeks. So that was basically what the operations people were doing before we launched, was every day Googling campsites, calling them up, asking them if they wanted to be on a new platform, asking if we could take their photos that they had on their website, writing descriptions for them, and then putting those into the back end that we built so we would have content. And I think we had 250 campsites for launch and then another 100 a week for the next 3 or 4 weeks as we kind of got up to speed. But yeah, it was the content team, hats off to them. They worked super hard and did a great job.
Hi, very nice presentation. What channels do you use for experimenting? Like, do you use YouTube, for instance, or do you use LinkedIn?
For getting orders?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think we used almost exclusively Google to start with, just because it's so easy to set up campaigns on it. And especially that had been part of our due diligence when we started the business, was looking at the search terms people were looking for. So one of the reasons we built the business was because we could see people searching on Google for camping holidays. And so we knew we could then bid on those keywords and get people coming to our site. And now obviously we kind of or post-launch, we then experimented a bit, branched out into other channels. But Google was a real large part of the launch strategy.
Why did you need a CEO?
So the CEO, yeah, I mean, we needed one eventually because they became the legal managing director. So they were responsible for the company. We incorporated Campsy as an entity, and we needed someone who was going to actually lead the company on an ongoing basis. They were helping out, across the board on everything from content to speaking to press to campsites, marketing, and so on. But this is more like a long-term hire than perhaps a tactical one.
And how do you keep ruthless focus?
Now, I mean, I think this is part of what product people do every day, right? Is that always, and especially if you're working in a startup, there's always things, 100 things that you could do. And you've got to be asking yourselves, is this the most important thing that I could be doing right now? Is this where we're going to get the most return on the limited resources that we've got? And so that's always what I'm trying to challenge founders with, or the rest of the team with, is, you speak to a marketing person, they'll tell you they want marketing features. You speak to an ops person, they'll want ops features. And you've really got to push back at them and be like, yeah, okay, but is this the one most important thing that we should be doing right now? And trying to give the whole company a product vision that makes sense and a product strategy.
But big round of applause again for Ed. Thank you very much.
Good life on me. Good life on me.